Who is the tall, dark stranger there? Maverick is the name. Riding the trail to who knows where. Luck is his companion. Gambling is his game. Riverboat, ring your bell. Fare thee well, Annabelle. Luck is the lady that he loves the best. Natchez to New Orleans, living on jacks and queens. Maverick is a legend of the West. Maverick is a legend of the West.
A Maverick deck is a legacy green-white aggro mid-range disruption deck that basically utilizes Knight of Reliquary and Green Sun Zenith to their fullest, and has a lot of utility, a lot of sweet interactions. You know, there's a lot of different versions of Maverick too. You know, you can play Stoneforge, you can play with Geist of St. Traff, you can play with Punishing Fire. It's very versatile.
Maverick was originally a European deck that evolved as a way to beat blue-heavy mid-range and tempo decks, and it did so very well. The American metagame only very recently picked up on it after it had been doing very well in Europe for months, if not years. Basically, it existed before Green Sun Zenith. Green Sun Zenith put it over the top, and it has made the transition to the US in a very big way.
Basically, you had brainstorm decks and not brainstorm decks, but most of the non-brainstorm decks were also just combo decks. And some people decided to build a green-based creature deck with a bunch of these like hate bears in it, and they called it Maverick because the word Maverick means like off the radar, or just like, you know, it's doing something that's not normal. And now that everybody's playing the deck, the name doesn't have the same meaning, but it still keeps that name just because that's what people recognize it as.
Someone really likes Top Gun out there, and legacy deck names have never been actually good. They've all been abysmal. I mean, you talk about legacy deck names, it's all Solidarity and Maverick and The Gate and Spanish Inquisition. I mean, none of these tell you anything about what's in the deck. They just are cute names that someone thought up because they really wanted to make a deck theirs, which is a defining feature of many, many legacy aficionados, diehard players.
My impressions for why they actually call it Maverick is that it's kind of a rogue deck. Here you have a field of decks. You have Rug Delver, you have Reanimator, you have Blue White Control, you have combo decks. Essentially, all these decks are featuring Brainstorm, and essentially is holding up all these powerful decks in the format. But Maverick as an archetype, which is really just green-white good stuff, is performing really well in the metagame without access to Brainstorm. So in a sense, it's kind of like a rogue element in the metagame and is able to actually put up very solid results without the reliance on blue.
I like Maverick because on paper it seems like such a wonky mid-range, green-white deck that doesn't really belong in such a fast format like Legacy. But there are so many interactions that the deck has that make it much more powerful than you would think when you sit across the table from it. Especially now that they've printed Thalia. And tutors are always good, and Green Sun Zenith is a green tutor. There's a lot of guys that pull a lot of weight in that deck, like Scavenging Ooze and Sully Pride Mage, and just having 8 Knight of the Reliquaries is pretty big against the rug decks. So, if you want to smash aggro control decks, Maverick usually does the job pretty well, while not leaving you completely dead against combo decks.
I personally don't like Maverick. I actually hate it. I think it's awful. It doesn't do anything good. It does everything like very mediocre. Like Talia, sometimes you just slam a Talia down. You're like, oh man, I'm playing Talia against Sneak and Show. It's really good. Hope they don't have a Soul Land, because if they play an Ancient Tomb and just show and tell, I'm dead anyway. Or like, for instance, if you're playing against Dredge, you sometimes keep hands with like Mother of Runes, Talia, Umezawa Jitte, which is really good against certain decks. But against Dredge, it doesn't do anything. You really need to have your Scavenging Ooze, or like, Knight of the Reliquary is a very good creature in the Legacy format. It's known for being an efficient creature. It's known for being a very big creature. It's known for being a creature that's difficult to deal with, difficult to attack around, and it's a utility creature. The utility, I personally think, is the worst part of the Knight of the Reliquary, and that is the part that Maverick utilizes to the fullest. I mean, half the time they have a 6/6 Nether Reliquary and they're not even attacking with it because they're going and getting more lands to put in their yard, or they're getting their Maze of Ith or their Horizon Canopies or Wastelands or something like that. And I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the deck. I don't think it does anything particularly broken. It does a lot of things that are mediocre compared to the rest of the format. And yet it's still a good deck. That's arguable. I think it mises tournaments. People get lucky with Maverick. I don't know. It's really hard to explain why that deck is doing so well. Actually, that's not really true. It's very consistent. That's what it has going for it.
Maverick is the most honest, fair deck. It's recognizable to someone who plays Magic. You can look at all of the cards and see what they do. It's deceptively powerful. You look at the creatures and it's 1/1s for 1 or 2/2s for 2. Or 2/2s for 3, and you think to yourself, how can this deck be good? And then you see it play, and all of its creatures have activated abilities or have some added value or are disruptive in some way. The deck tutors, 3 times in 5 turns, and so it plays the game it wants to play, which is different depending on the matchup.
You look at the list on paper and you say, okay, yeah, I can see many of these cards are situational, but how does it all mesh together? Don't you need a big fat beater like Tarmogoyf to actually do work, to actually attack and block and control the battlefield? So when I first sleeved it up and started playing with it, I noticed right away that Tarmogoyf is one of the weakest creatures. So because it has no abilities. It's just a wall with power. And the deck doesn't necessarily need more creatures that don't do anything. So if you notice, all the creatures in the deck have some sort of activated ability. You have mana accelerators with Noble Hierarch and Dryad Arbor. You have protection with Mother of Ruins. You have onboard tricks with Scrib Ranger and Knight of a Reliquary and Kasali Pride Mage and Scavenging Ooze. All these creatures give the Maverick deck an ability to interact with the opponent without actually having to rely on spells.
I personally thought that any deck with Mother Runes in it was a joke for a long time until I actually played with it. And then you realize that Mother Runes is actually just a 1-mana Planeswalker with 5 different abilities. It's target creature becomes unblockable, target creature gets protection from the color of your choice to counter a removal spell, and it can block and fog a creature because it can give itself protection from the creature it blocks, and it can just attack. I mean, it's an amazing creature for 1 mana. You can't ask for much more. So I really hope that it sticks around because it's an awesome deck and I love to play it.
I think that Maverick has become one of the most popular decks in Legacy precisely because it's a green deck that can take on Force of Will decks and win, and that's something that people want to see. People see a lot of Brainstorm Force of Will decks in Legacy. That's nothing new. Whatever you do with the other 52 cards, people aren't bound to be that impressed. But when you take Mother of Runes into battle against cards like, Brainstorm, Stoneforge Mystic, Gristlebrand, and you win, that's a deck that people can root for.
Who is the tall, dark stranger there? Maverick is the name. Riding the trail to who knows where. Luck is his companion. Gambling is his game. Riverboat, ring your bell. Fairly well, Annabelle. Luck is the lady that he loves the best. Natchez to New Orleans, living on jacks and queens. Maverick is a legend of the West. Maverick is a legend of the West.